And this dusty machine here is the 2023 Mazda CX-50. It's a vehicle that lives almost in the exact same position in Mazda's lineup as its current CX-5. It's a little bit wider and a little bit longer, and yeah, the roof line's a touch lower, but it's basically in the same spot in the lineup. Now, a normal automaker would position this as the replacement for the CX-5 rather than its contemporary, but Mazda's not a normal automaker. So let's hop behind the wheel and see what, aside from looking a lot more badass, is the difference between this and the CX-5. Now, like I mentioned, the CX-50 is longer and wider than the CX-5, but only by a little bit, not enough to bump it out of its class. But that pays dividends in the rear cargo area where you have more floor space for bulky items, and on the second row where there's more leg room for second row passengers. However, the shorter roof height means that you're going to trade off a little bit of headroom. Not a big problem if you're about my height, 5'9", 5'10" inches on a good day. But if you like to put 6-footers in the second row, well, they're going to notice that difference. Now, the dust is probably your best indicator of what separates the audience for this vehicle from the audience for the CX-5. And that's because Mazda's positioning this as more of an adventure vehicle with a little more off-road capability than its narrower, taller sibling. And that means they've done things like added about an inch of extra ground clearance, bringing you to just over 8 inches, in the same ballpark as the Subaru Outback. Not enough to transform this into a rock crawler, but enough to give you a little bit more capability when the trail starts undulating around and you know that you're not going to hit your undercarriage on a rock. The low roof height also pays dividends when you're putting things onto a roof rack on the top. It's just easier to get up there when you don't have to reach up that extra inch. And the rear door opens up a little bit wider so you can stand on the door sill and get even better access to things like a roof tent if you wanted to do that, or a bike rack. Now, in addition to the physical changes to this vehicle, Mazda's also added 2 new drive modes to what it calls its Mazda Intelligent Drive Select System, or MI Drive. Now, you've got your normal, which is your normal sort of sporty driving. You've got your sport, which gives you a little bit more sort of steering feel. It feels a little bit weightier, but because there's no adaptive suspension or anything, that's pretty much the only real difference. Is just the car is a little more engaged. Then you've also got off-road mode, which is going to basically make the sort of gravel trails that Mazda expects the drivers of this sort of vehicle to be driving on feel more like the same level of grip that you would be getting on tarmac. Again, it doesn't transform the feeling of the vehicle, but it does add a little bit more sure-footedness when you're going around a gravelly bend, and makes the car feel a little more planted. And finally, there's towing mode, which only comes available if you plug in a trailer using Mazda's trailer hitch. It's going to replace the sport mode in the MI Drive system, and it's going to allow drivers to take full advantage of the 2,000 pound towing capacity for the naturally aspirated version of this vehicle, or 3,500 pounds for the turbocharged model we're in here now. And that's going to adjust the behavior of the transmission and the all-wheel drive system so that the vehicle feels more stable when you're towing a heavy load. Again, not a huge difference, but enough to make it feel a little more sure-footed. Now, Mazda's approach with its MI Drive modes is that it shouldn't be a Jekyll and Hyde situation where the CX-50 feels like a completely different vehicle when you change drive modes. Rather, this should feel like the same vehicle with the same driving dynamics for different situations and use cases. And I think that approach works well with what Mazda's doing here. Now, like I mentioned, there are 2 powertrain options, both 2.5-liter inline 4-cylinder Skyactiv G engines. If you go the naturally aspirated route, you're looking at 187 horsepower and 186 pound-feet of torque. Slapping a turbo onto it, like we've got today, steps you up to 256 horsepower and 320 pound-feet of torque. Now, those numbers are if you're using 93 octane fuel. If you cheap out and get 87 octane, you'll step down to 227 and 310 pound-feet. Still a decent amount of grunt, and you may be tempted to go that way considering how much fuel costs these days. Either way, you're looking at a 6-speed automatic transmission and standard iActive all-wheel drive. Now, I really like the way this turbocharged powertrain feels. It's got a good amount of kick when you need to accelerate and make a pass, and I like that the throttle feels nice and responsive. There's a very linear feel, not a lot of turbo lag, but just good to get up and go. Now, both on and off-road today, I was pretty impressed by the handling of this vehicle. It's got that Mazda feeling to the steering that just makes it an enjoyable vehicle to take around a corner, whether you're on tarmac or whether you're on loose gravel. Now, one of the things that I did not like about this vehicle is going to be the dashboard technology. I'll mention it briefly. In this one, we have a 10.25-inch screen. It uses Mazda's Mazda Connect technology. It is not a touchscreen. It uses a physical controller unless you're using Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. And even then, it's a pretty far reach for the screen. If you're just using the built-in stuff, it's pretty easy to get used to because it doesn't do a ton. But if you're the kind of person that likes Android Auto or Apple CarPlay, well, hate's a strong word, but you're gonna hate this one. Okay, the last thing to consider is price. The 2023 Mazda CX-50 starts at $28,025, including destination charges for the base S model with the naturally aspirated engine. Now, if you want to go turbo, and I recommend you at least give it a try, you're looking at an entry point of $37,625. Fully loaded with all the bells and whistles, it tops out at $42,775. So there's your pricing envelope right there. And across the board, it's a little bit more expensive than, say, a Subaru Outback, just a touch more expensive. But I believe that this is a vehicle that positions itself as being a little bit more premium than the Subaru. Plus, its on-road performance is, in my opinion, a little bit better for that 90% of the time that you're going to be driving on tarmac without too much of a compromise to the 10 or 20% of the time that you'll actually be off-road. Now, I'm still not sold on the idea that there's room in Mazda's lineup for both this and the CX-5. I mean, one of those vehicles is definitely going to cannibalize the other one, and it's going to be this one doing the chowing down. It's just a better looking vehicle, and the promise of the off-road capability is just going to be too much, I think, for American buyers to resist. But Mazda's CX-50 does a really good job of meeting the mission that Mazda has put in front of it, and I'm looking forward to spending more time with it when it hits the road later this year. Now, if you're interested in more of the nitty-gritty details of what it's like to drive and live with the new Mazda CX-50, well, you can head over to cnet.com where we've got our full first drive review. And make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next review or debut.